The first panel discussion at the 20th Conference of Financial Institutions in Dodoma focused on Tanzania's economic growth during and beyond COVID-19 pandemic. Discussants were given the task to highlight priorities and policy options. The panel was led by former Executive Director of the United Nations Habitat, a Tanzanian agricultural economist, Professor Anna Tibaijuka.
But also we are here, we are going to have to do, Irene, what we have to do. And what we have to do is to listen to the panelists who have come to educate us. So let me invite Colonel Joseph Simbakalia. He actually also doesn't need any introduction to most of you. His bio is circulated, but very briefly, we are going to hear from a retired army engineer of the Tanzanian People's Defense Force, who has had many positions in Tanzania, served in the National Development Corporation as the managing director, and many central transformative institutions of this country. He's also an author of several books and papers. So, Colonel Joseph Simbakalia, you have the floor. I am actually allocating 5 minutes to every speaker, but then plus or minus 2 minutes. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be brief because of time. I think the one thing that probably I want the audience to go home with is that one of the key lessons about the COVID-19 pandemic should be the importance of self-reliance, because we saw the global disruption of supply lines, and I think increasing self-reliance ourselves, that maximum utilization of own resources, and collectively with our neighbors is really the answer. But beneath that, I would say self-reliance in thinking. So, policy research, policy analysis, policy formulation, and what you're going to do. To borrow the thoughts of Professor Shea here, that there are no cut and paste answers. We have to learn from experience. And those of my age and those who are a bit younger than me, like Professor Tibaijuka and Professor Wangwe, would recall that in 1978, we actually had a national pandemic in the form of cholera. There was no lockdown, but there were controlled movements around the country. So actually one can go back, I don't have time, and recall some of the lessons from that time. So I just wanted to say that. And to that point, I think one can see clearly that we haven't learned about investment in preparedness. I think it was in Professor Wango's presentation. And preparedness for what? I think there are 4 or 5 critical areas that count on national survival, national security. And that's food, water, energy, Medicare, and money. And I can see now we're going through another cycle. Tanzania has a 10-year drought cycle. You can go at the beginning of every decade. And then if there are no rains, it means you have shortage of food. It means you have energy crisis because depending on hydropower. And then, Mr. Governor, we're going to be under pressure if we have to import food because we don't have enough food reserves, drinking water. And what does that mean? I think we have to now think at policy level, formulate national risk management. It's how do you de-risk the economy? And the areas that I think we are endowed. In the remarks of the central governor, he said that the central bank is going to start buying gold. And I said, bravo, because with the pandemic, I remember it was an EPZA, some of our companies couldn't export because the customers were not buying, ships were not going. And so these are forex earners. And you find that for the most part, we depend on export of services, of goods, to create foreign reserves. When in fact, we could get our small-scale miners, who we pay shillings, start building reserves. There are mathematicians around you, but I calculated that the $367 million we're getting for IMF is only 12 tons of bullion gold. That means our small-scale producers produce a ton a month. I'm quite sure they are capable of doing that. And how do you finance that? Print money. Give it to them. It's not red money. It's money against goods. Will that create inflation? No. These are my blood cousins, I know. Most of it will go to consumption. You'll get it through VAT, through whatever. So, is that the answer? I don't know. Think about it. I think it's doable. Just quickly now to finish because of time. The issue of long-term development agenda. In the President's remark, was there, echoed by Professor Ongwe, I think Richard Dite. But you see, economists will tell you any economy will grow only as much as the financial sector will allow it to. If we do not have development finance sector well developed, there is no way we can fund our long-term development agenda. And if we're depending on outsiders, well, the bank be fit to do that, I think we're going to wait until the cows come home. It's not going to happen. It will happen at their pace, at their pleasure, at their agenda, but not to ours. So I think it's time, Mr. Governor, you considered how you regulate people like TIB, TADB. Maybe we should have an industrial bank. We cannot have industrialization, we just an industrial bank, and that's regulated to provide long-term finance. How do we do that? I have this crazy idea that with so much money we say sloshing around, why don't we create a national economic reconstruction and development fund to move us from here going forward? And last but not least, this is going to be done by the private sector. You know, let's not kid ourselves. We do not have a private sector here. I don't mean to be direct, but it's nothing. We need to nurture the people who have ventured with private sector and create more. So there has to be affirmative action in doing that. Private sector is not going to go just like mushroom. Chair, I think that for now. Thank you very much. Thank
you very much. Let us give him a hand. He has spoken from experience, and I would like to, for this session, it is an honor to share this session with you. I know you are my big brother, but I'm not far away from you in that regard, with Professor Wangwe. We are all senior citizens of this country. So we thank the governor for inviting us to interact with you guys. Two main things I think we should take from his presentation. We don't need dollars to buy gold from small miners. I think we should really take that seriously. We use our shillings to collect the gold from the miners. We shall purify it, Professor, to 99.9%. Finally, but we must have the stock first to be able to purify it. If we allow this gold to live, these are non-renewable resources. If they live. You cannot replicate them. All commendation goes to Mwalimu. I am old enough, Simbakaria, to have heard Mwalimu say, I can't touch mining. I know where the minerals are, but I have no knowledge base to supervise the sector. Let the coming generation supervise. So he reserved the minerals in the ground. Now we are mining. I don't know whether we are getting value for money, but at least on the market front, for the financiers, I think, and talking of new institutions, Tanzania Investment Bank is actually the equivalent of the World Bank, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. The true partner of the central bank is the IMF, if I may. The partner of the World Bank in this country should be the TIB. This is how things are, realistically. But because of our situation, we need money quickly, so the big guys, of course, the Bank of Tanzania is the big guys. But I would like to say that what he said. And that does not invent the wheel. Let us strengthen these institutions. Recently, I saw someone, I think, Governor, I think you have given the new regulations where you are saying now the executives of banks should only be there for 10 years. So I was thinking of merging them, saying, no, we need that guy at CRDB. So if how are you going to build the capacity? This regulation, I hope it was a draft. If it was not, I would like to request seriously that this proposal is simply not a good proposal. Because we must build the capacity of the executives. Imagine CRDB, as I told, I told you, it was a cooperative roadmap bank. Until Charles Kimei was taken from the central bank with Danish assistance to become the CRDB that you have today. It took him, I think, 20 years. I don't think you could have done it in 10 years. So institution building is not our strength. These musical chairs running around, 10 years is for us politicians. Parliament is fine, 10 years you can go out. But I think in capacity building of the management cadre, we shall use long haul. So I would like to say that TIB is very important. Now, finally, we move to Judith Karangi. Judith is the Executive Director for Tanzania Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. She is a G100 Tanzania Country Chair for Sustainable Mining and the East African Technical Committee representative for African Women in Mining. So we are in many things nowadays. Glory to God. We are in many things. She is a founding member of the Minerals Africa, etc., etc. Time is not on our side. Please read her bio. Very impressive. Judith, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Professor. I should be honest that I've listened a lot to the extent that I'm taken away now. I don't know what to speak. But it's good, and I'm so happy to be part of this panel. I'm so honored to be part of taking session today. I've heard from what the professors have spoken. I'm not a professor, but I'm learning more from you. I will be happy to share a little bit of what we do as a solution oriented to the pandemic problem that we've been having for the economic growth and sustainability. What should we be doing? As we all know, I will just touch a little bit on mining because it's my area of passion. I've done mining a little bit within I've worked with large-scale mining for approximately 5 years under the Community Affairs Department, but equally I've managed to work as a general manager for medium and small-scale mining for like 3 years. So I have a lot of things discussed here, and I've been part of the people driving processes to see how financial institutions can support mining areas. It's a little bit challenging based on the fact that we don't have geological information at the ground, which is really giving banks challenge. And I think most of banks which we have been able to reach them, they have shared the same challenge. So for me, straight to the mining, I would say banks should not only employ financial specialists. You need to have geologists in your bank. You need to have metallurgists. Because by that way, you need somebody to tell you at the ground what is happening. Let me give a little example which is very practical. You have dealers who come to borrow from you 1 billion or 2 billion. It's very good. But the same dealers go to buy from the small-scale mining areas which have no geological information. In that way, we are happy because we know at the end of the day we can raise them accountable if they are not capable of bringing money back to the bank. But the truth is they are buying not from the exploration areas. So the bank can stretch a little bit and think of employing those professionals, work with government bodies, registered bodies to get those professionals to come at the ground. One of the things which I've been doing when I was doing myself small-scale mining, I've sold gold. I've done that. I've been part of people who have been going to Dr. Biteko, trying to ask for some intervention, especially for women and youth. And the challenge is we need to stretch beyond. Because of time, I'll just leave it there. But also on the mining part, I'm honored that I've been part of the experts in the group process currently going on with the African Union for formalization and formulation of continental artisan and small-scale mining. We've now been working as the under the private sector, one of the processes which we are trying to discuss is to see how we can regard small-scale mining just like any other startup business. When we speak of mining, it's like we've categorically put it aside like a business which is really a very high-risk business. I would say I'm not a metallurgist, I'm just an environmentalist. But I was able to employ a registered metallurgist to work on my site. And if she was telling me that we are gonna get 400 grams, it was plus or minus 300 grams or something. Why? It's because we need to treat those women at the ground to give them professionals to measure for them before they engage a lot of chemicals while processing. So I think that is something which the government can try to look. And we as private sectors, we are ready to support those women. We have recruited TAWOMA, Tanzania Women Miners Association, because I'm part of them. I've invited them under TCCIA. And actually, I was able also to bring on board and commend to the Africa Minerals Development Center, the General Secretary, and she was among the presenters in the meeting which happened under African Union. She was speaking Swahili, but I was able to translate for her, so that she can speak her mind. That is something we miss on police forums. We see it, yes, we are having something about superiority complex, Mama mentioned. And it's very good because we are knowledgeable, we have gone to schools, but sometimes we lack the practical aspect of what is happening at the ground. And I think that is the area which we need to capitalize, not only on mining, but also even on the agriculture. If you ask, most of people are reading literature reviews and everything, but they have never gone to farm. So how can you be able to speak about the farmer project problem while you don't know what farming is? You need farmers to come on board. Even if they can't speak English, they just do vernacular. You can translate for them and then you can have the right approach. So with the ASM Management Continental Strategy coming up, a lot of ASM associations have been involved. In fact, the name is changing, and I think this one will be shared by African Union from that artisanal way, because we regard our people as artisans, not the Western, the way they treat their people. They have minerals which they call critical minerals, but for us it's not critical. It's actually what we give to them. They make cars and then we drive those cars from our own minerals. So it's part of the thing which I think we need to look when we are driving the processes of policy formulation within the government, but also align with other African countries. Among 55 or member states, we need to see what are others doing. What is the definition when we regard small? Is it small in all across Africa? So that is something I wanted to touch on mining. Now coming back to TCCIA and economic growth and sustainability during and beyond pandemic, part of the things which have been able, okay, thank you. Part of the things which we have been able to do is to go on digitization, which is a process now we are discussing with the International Chamber of Commerce to see what others are doing. But equally, we have been able to go with the MOU for the African Continental Free Trade Area, the iTrade, which is sitting under the African Union, to see how we can support the private sector within the government. So we have written the letter to the Prime Minister's office to request them to help us, help all the private sector, SMEs, individual businesses which are formally registered in order to be able to trade under the e-commerce. But why did we do that? Because we know there are incentives. So this is something which I want to advise also the banks, that wherever we have these digital systems, how are we going to benefit as platforms? The iTrade is very clear, we do shares. Why doing those? Very pet incentive, like when people trade on the registration, just that registration you can get $1. So for any sustainable association, within 5 to 10 years, then you are able to collect something to be able to lead your people even at the midst of the challenge where there is no any donor. So we need to have those practical oriented solutions at the ground in order to be able to advise our people well, and also the government. But also another thing which I'll speak now, we have ratified on African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. This thing, it's something which we have, I will say, because we have started the processes with the secretariat, And next year, beginning January, we are having partnership with the Secretariat to come and do awareness for policymakers, for SMEs, and all the groups under the private sector associations. Why do we need to know that? It's because we need to understand exactly what does it mean and how our country is going to benefit from this bigger economy that we are reading online. So we can say, okay, 1 minute. Okay, let me finish up or wind up. Yeah, so we can say that we need to do that in order to be able, wherever we speak about e-commerce, digital, there should be a certain incentive for the groups which will come with the bank, just a little bit to make them sustainable even during pandemic. The last thing will be institutional capacity building. That is something which we need to do for women and youth groups that we are currently advocating. So a lot of groups have been opened recently. They all aim at supporting women. I think we get a lot of requests. As banks, you get a lot of requests, and for me, I will also come to give mine. But what is it now? We need to involve a lot of professors like you are sitting here to come up and tell us what does it mean when we say of institutional strengthening, in order for us to be able to have those institutions within the country that can be able to run within 10, 15 years. We have students graduating, they can be proud to come and do internship within those associations so that they can adopt the lessons which we can actually be using. And speaking about that, we need to adopt those innovations which are user-friendly at the ground. One of the things which we discussed at the African Union Private Sector Forum last week was wherever we speak of agriculture, we speak of China being producers of the equipment. Can't we have our own technologies that even if there is a pandemic and there is no import and export, can really be able to keep the agriculture on track? So this is something which I wanted to share briefly. I have a lot, but I hope next time I'll do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judith. That was a very enlightening and passionate challenge of organizing people. As I was listening to you talking about capacity for mining officers. At the moment, the mining officers are busy collecting revenue for the mining licenses. I have not seen them disseminating knowledge. Manake unasikia kuna bwana shamba, kuna bwana afya. Sasa bwana madini, they are busy collecting fees, which is wonderful, but they should also give knowledge.
The economist, Professor Samuel Wangwe, was especially passionate about agricultural transformation.
Global value chains have been interrupted, the health systems have been interrupted, social health and education have suffered, and at the economic level, incomes have contracted, economic activity, normally, especially those in tourism and sectors most affected has been affected. So the damage is known and information has been given before, so I will not go into further details. But that's the context in which we are addressing the issue now. Now, first priority we need to address is the need to prioritize our response to COVID-19 pandemic in the country through following a coherent and multidimensional approach. Because we have seen the impact of COVID has been largely multidimensional, affecting a wide range of sectors, and therefore the response must be able to address a wide range of sectors. So health, economic, and several social aspects, decisions on allocation of fiscal resources, support for domestic manufacturing of health facilities, medicines, including vaccines, will be on the agenda. Strengthening national health systems. This is an area which has already been addressed. Taking investments to be better prepared for a crisis of similar type should it arise. According priority to socio-economic challenges caused by the pandemic. From experience elsewhere, when we have a deep recession which affects the economy badly, it's very difficult to revive if you don't intervene. But with the right interventions, recovery can be very fast, faster than expected. So we'd like to see intervention which will make recovery fast. The issue I would like to focus more in this presentation is the need for reaffirming, not to be carried away by short-term responses, but to reaffirm our focus on long development agenda, in particular growth with transformation and inclusivity, and reviving the interaction between social and economic policy. Now, growth with transformation. We expect to see economic growth which is high, inclusive, creates jobs, and is sustainable. And we like to say the kind of transformation we expect in our type of economy must reflect the Tanzanian situation. We have seen the currently developed countries, they have gone through transformation. Each one going through a kind of transformation which reflects their realities. Take the case of one of the first transformers, UK. They transformed the economy, starting by agricultural transformation. Agricultural transformation resulting in higher productivity of agriculture, which released labor to industry which was growing and absorbing this labor. So you could see agriculture releasing labor, productivity in agriculture increasing, industry receiving that labor, industry feeding into agriculture with agricultural machinery, therefore making it more modernized agriculture. So the two were building on top of each other. Where agriculture was feeding industry with raw materials, and where raw materials could not be found, they were found in the colonies. So we were part of that system of the reform process. An opportunity we don't have now. There is no one who can colonize now and have that opportunity. So we have to reform in our own context. Now, in our situation, we are having a situation where agriculture is releasing labor to the cities, but it's not finding industry to absorb that labor. So that labor is finding its own way. And its own way, we find it mainly in the informal economic activities. Yet, agriculture is still very poor. The poverty is rampant there. In the informal activity in the urban centers, there is also poverty. So we are having people running away from agriculture, whose productivity is low, running away to the cities where they find another form of poverty. So one can say they are running away from poverty to poverty. A strange situation which did not face other countries when you look at their experiences. So in that kind of situation, my argument is we have to start transformation which starts with transforming agriculture to raise productivity. And second, we shall address transforming the informalization of the economy and transforming industrialization. Those three issues I will emphasize. And now, agricultural transformation and sustainable food systems. Food is a very important wage good. Food is a good which everybody spends on, including labor. So if you don't get food right in terms of affordable food, industrialization and the other sectors, the non-agricultural sectors, will be very difficult to be transformed. So you see the case for promoting a more sustainable food system while bearing in mind sustainability, through increased organic agriculture by protecting the soils and increasing storage of biomass, and linking investments and advisory services for farmers building on successful business models. We see a variety of successful business models within Tanzania, but they are isolated cases. We have not seen them being replicated to be the main driver of agricultural transformation. Therefore, agricultural productivity on average remains quite low, but there are wide variations of productivity levels. We have islands of very high productivity. We have the rest which are having very low productivity. Therefore, poverty is still quite widespread in agriculture because agricultural productivity is very low, leading to low incomes and productivity. This is the situation we'd like to address and see it change. Transform agriculture into high productivity agriculture with high levels of incomes, so that you don't have agriculture releasing poor people into the urban. They do not find employment in industries when it's not expanding, where you create types of poverty. So agriculture is the key starting point. If we don't start there, we cannot see other forms of transformation taking place in other sectors. So we proceed with the second set now. If you have transformed agriculture, raised productivity, now we follow up those people who have largely run away from agriculture, trying to run away from that poverty to find poverty in the urban centers. They are in the informal economy. Those people in the informal economy, their productivity levels are very low, their income is very low. And we cannot deal with them in a sporadic way. Today you say you are free, you can have a vitambulisho. Tomorrow you say now you can move to other areas. Tomorrow you say now you are doing that. It cannot be addressed by ad hoc measures. It has to be part of a long-term agenda to address the informal economic activities in three main respects. One is to ensure that the legal and regulatory systems are friendly to the informal economic activities, to encourage them to formalize. You cannot formalize them by force. You create conditions for them to want to formalize. But second is facilitating access to resources. Access to resources like finance, information, technology, and all of the information which are required. Can we transform it? Okay, it has hurt and it's being repressed. Now it is behaving. So we proceed. Facilitating access to these resources so as to facilitate productivity increase in this sector and to give them the incentive to want it to formalize, but ultimately to raise productivity. But in this I emphasize the third aspect, that we need to understand that there is an interaction between the informal economy and the formal economy. Because it's very easy to treat them as if they are completely separate sectors. They are not. There are many interactions between them. These need to be understood so that when we are pursuing policies to transform the informal economy, to formalize it, we'll be bearing in mind that interaction between formal and informal. A third area now is industrialization. If you improve agricultural productivity, transform agriculture, you need a means of value addition and competitiveness in the industrial sector. The industrial sector is receiving one in terms of adding value, moving up in the value chain in agriculture. Then you can have the market, which is sustainable. So industrialization is very central in this regard. So COVID-19 pandemic is likely to have accelerated actually the process of digitalization of manufacturing, shortening global value chains, increasing regional trade, mass customization, and business adaptation. So you see that has impacted on manufacturing, introducing digitalization, which we shall discuss in the afternoon. And I believe we shall address the issue of making what we have experienced to be the new normal. So the new normal in the post-pandemic world will increasingly be driven by advanced technologies and the application for inclusive and sustainable industrial development. Technology is the force behind, the main driving force behind competitiveness, behind productivity increase, behind increasing incomes. So technology has to be at the center to be addressed. In that one, we shall be addressing digitalization. But it's important to understand that digitalization is an important part of technology, but it's not the whole story. There's a whole story about technology which drives competitiveness. So today we'll be addressing one part, but should bear in mind that if you have to address productivity increase in the economy, you have to address productivity, you have to address the role of technology. In the 70s, the Nigerian government were very aware of the importance of technology. That's why they formed actually institutions like TBA, Tanzania Industrial Research Development Organization, TENDO, Tanzania Engineering and Manufacturing Design Organization, institutions of that type which are institutions like Kamatech to revolutionize agriculture. They were formed to do that job. But unfortunately, in the 80s, the policies which were pursued actually put aside these institutions, because they were looking at long-term structural adjustment programs, short-term structural adjustment programs. Now that we decided to look long-term, then we have to revisit the role of research, innovations, and technology. Actually, I think the President mentioned the importance of this aspect, so we believe that we can carry it forward now to practice. So strengthening innovation clusters and ecosystems, and not forgetting that small, medium enterprises can be driven in terms of their productivity with the right technology driving their productivity. But first, in terms of the long-term transformation, is the safety sector, not to forget it. It's a sector which accounts for about 45% of the GDP. So this is a sector which is servicing other sectors, servicing agriculture, servicing industry, and servicing other service activities. So if we don't get it right in terms of transforming it, then we will not get right the other sectors which are being driven. I started with agriculture because when we talk of poverty, we understand that 65% of the labor force lives in agriculture. But agriculture contributes only 25% of the GDP, which means that 2/3 of the population is squeezed within 1/4 of the GDP. The rest of the 3/4 we are sharing, we here, who are not in agriculture. But the majority, to transform their lives, we have to begin with transforming agriculture, followed by transformation of the informal economy, followed by transformation through industrialization, followed by transformation of the service sector. Now, in order to do all this, what is cutting across all this is technology development, including digital transformation, which offers the potential to transform the economy, which has a considerable role in creating incomes, raising productivity, creating trade, creating jobs, and creating access to markets. So technology is key. We shall have a hint in terms of the digital technology. But there are other sorts of technologies which we are not addressing today because we cannot address everything in one conference. Now, this development agenda has to, a lesson from COVID is that it impacts many sectors. So we have to, the lesson is to mainstream the interaction between social and economic policy for economic transformation. So the concern of social policy to be explicit in articulation of economic transformation. We cannot say now we are transforming the economy, we will follow later the social sectors of social policy. They must interact and go together. This is one lesson from the COVID experience, but also had this experience in the 70s. It started as an interaction, but when structural investment programs came, He said, leave behind social policies, deal with the economy first. Once we get the economy right, then the rest will follow. Thank you. So there's a need to achieve both national, economic, and social goals. So if you're dealing with agricultural transformation, this interaction must be observed. If you're dealing with industrialization, this interaction must be involved. In which case, you will not forget producing medicines, you will not forget producing educational facilities, you will not forget producing for the social sectors. Transforming the services, we will not forget the social policy. So whatever kind of transformation, we have to see that interaction taken on board. And here there is a very strong case for explicit public health. What we have seen in the COVID experience, now we call is basically public health, which we have ignored. So collective action and public health to deliver essential and primary public goods, to protect community health, and set the parameters for continuous health systems reform should be part of this interaction. So a more comprehensive vision of public health will be required, and the strengthening of public health to face the challenges of the 21st century will be given priority. So public health will be an essential element of playing a social function. So as we have seen, the multinational, the multi-sectoral approach is extremely important. Now I conclude by saying we need to make interventions to stimulate recovery. Interventions have already been made, as the governor told us this morning. What we need to do is, and we already saw interventions, as the president was saying about what he has done in that package of 1.3 billion from the IMF. So that intervention is being already made, but we need now to address that package, that stimulus package, more comprehensively as we go. So there is a strong case for designing, or since already we heard from the governor that there is a package of policies to stimulate recovery. I think it is important to reinforce this package. Second, we need to embark on a long-term development agenda informed by growth with the transformation and mainstreaming the interaction between economic and social policy. And finally, we need to adopt the new normal in many ways led by digitalization. And this will take us to the next session. We shall address this issue fully in the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Wango. I think he has really raised a number of issues. He has basically emphasized the interaction, agricultural industrial interface. He said you cannot put the cart before the horse. We have to start with the source of raw materials, the source of labor. It has implied agriculture is a residual employer. It means it is actually a sector that is holding all this reserve of labor force, which must leave agriculture. Let me take the opportunity to say, people must leave agriculture. Economic advancement cannot allow people to remain in agriculture. So in the United States, maybe 6% of the people are in agriculture. In some advanced countries, you have only about 3-4% of people in agriculture. Why? Because structural transformation that Professor Wong was talking about implies that agriculture, the productivity in agriculture moves faster than in industries and services. And this is not always recognized. So agriculture is a residual employer because the productivity in agriculture is moving much faster. And on this session, we shall be hearing from people now who have advanced into industrial agriculture, like Mr. Seth. I think when he takes the floor, he will tell us, he will see the practical experience of what happens if agriculture is transformed. But if agriculture is not transformed, then people move out of it prematurely, as Professor Wango has warned us. We have to be aware. Because if people leave agriculture prematurely, particularly in this era of COVID-19, if international trade was to stop, for example, then the Malthusian spectre, Malthus was an economist who predicted that if there is no international trade, we would all die from hunger because we will not be able to feed ourselves. We are doing well in Tanzania in terms of food security, but we are still, I think, when all is counted, we might even be still a net food importing country. We don't have enough milk. If we don't get our milk from Holland, we shall run into problems. So, the finance, this is a financial conference. I would like to emphasize and encourage my panelists also to look at the financial, the investment side of things. So, when we say we give priority to agriculture, it means we must give money to agriculture. And I think in this forum, I'm very happy. Even the CRDB, the chairman of the Banking Association of Tanzania, Mr. Majid, the name of your bank, Cooperative and Rural Development Bank. Actually, it is started, let us give it an approach. It is started with Cooperative and Rural Development Bank. But nowadays, if you are a farmer, you go there, they say you go to the TADI, the Tanzania Agricultural Bank. So I would like to take this opportunity, if I may, for this audience, also when we discuss, to focus on the investment side of things. Finally, things will look like the way they were financed. If agriculture is neglected, there is no finance, it will not flourish. As the professor has told us, Professor Wanga said the young people will vote with their feet and they come to the cities, into the informal economy. They are not there because they have rejected agriculture. They are there because they have been neglected. Nobody was taking care of them. And before I call in Mr. Chris Williams, I cannot tell you that you can't talk about agriculture without talking about marketing. Because the surplus which cannot be consumed on the farm must be marketed. And in this country, my assessment is that agricultural marketing is still a challenge. So the financing of agricultural marketing, the cooperative and development bank, you call it, the Tanzania Agricultural Bank, you can produce, but you are producing for who? And what is the food chain, the value chain, the marketing chain, and the agriculture. And the reason, sitting in this wonderful conference hall here, where I have sit in various capacities, also to protect agricultural marketing, to professionalize agricultural markets, and to keep, not to put in too much politics into agricultural marketing. So I think these are the challenges that Professor Wanga said so well. Time is not on our side. I would like to say that the banks which are presented here, the commercial banks, but also the development banks. I think I saw Mr. Charles Singiri, I think that the TADIB and the Tanzania Investment Bank. Here, Professor Woga, if I may, the governor and your deputies, you should really look at the state of the development banks. Because TADIB might deal with crops and livestock, but who is dealing with rural infrastructure? We have decentralized in this country. We have now these local authorities who should fix these feeder roads and access roads for agriculture, for rural transformation. So I would like to vouch that we cannot afford not to give enough money to our development banks. Because if we do, it means we are neglecting agriculture. And if we neglect agriculture, the young people, believe you me, we all know they will be in the cities. You heard my bio, you can try to demolish their huts for 2-3 months. After 4 months they will come back because they have nowhere to go. So we really must put our act together, and this building has given this chance.